Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. We have another 3-game slate over at DraftKings tonight, Tuesday, April 30th. So this could be fun or it could be horrible. We saw a lot of elimination games yesterday and they went exactly as expected. It was not a fun slate. I didn't do very well, but hopefully some of the insight I offered in my favorite plays, some of them did okay. So hopefully that helped you out and you ended up winning a little bit. The goal is to win again today. And I think we can do that. I think there's a clear, obvious path, and we'll just have to find a few spots to get a little bit different. And hopefully we can do it. So before we get started here, this video is sponsored by DFS Hero. Really cool lineup optimizer. I'm using their projections for this video. You should give them a shot. If you click the link in the video description below this video, you can get 15% off to try them out. If this video helps you in any way, please give it a like. That lets me know that you liked it and it's helping you out. Also give our channel a subscribe so we know we're doing the right thing, and also so you get alerted to future videos. All right, let's dive right into it. We have the first game of the night, Sixers and Knicks. That tips everything off at 6 p.m. Central. Sixers are 4-point dogs on the road at Madison Square Garden. The game is a 203.5 total. New York is up 3-1 in this series. These games have been relatively low scoring, so that sounds about right. Worth noting that even though the Knicks have technically dominated as far as having the 3-1 series edge, pretty much every game has been close. The last game was decided by 5 points. Game 2 was decided by 3 points. I mean, really, those games could have gone either way very, very easily. Game 3 was the only one that wasn't really that close down the stretch, but it's been a bit of a dogfight, and the Knicks have just, had the edge late. I am not going to count Joel Embiid out fully just yet because the games have been close, and a big win here could send it to game 6, and then suddenly we have a series again. So Joel Embiid up top at 10.9K with the best projection of the slate. Kind of hard to ignore. There's a lot of good mid-range, a lot of good viable options that their prices have been spiked for good reason. So I don't think Embiid is absolutely necessary, but it's worth noting he has a 41% boom rating. This is a massive game 5 where obviously if the Sixers lose, they're out. So I would imagine he shows out and gives it all he has. He's had some big games in this series. He had 58 fantasy points last game, 69 fantasy points with 50 real points the game before in Philly's only win. So he could easily smash here. He could easily nuke the slate. The most interesting thing about this is he's still not really that expensive for who he is, especially relative to the slate. I mean, relative to the slate, he should probably be like 11.5K or something at least. And he's only coming in at 16% ownership. So as things stand, I do prefer more of a balanced build with where I can go get these awesome mid-range guys. But if Joel Embiid is actually going to stick at about 16%, or if that even somehow dips, I'm going to be very, very interested in Joel Embiid. So he looks good. Nothing wrong with paying up for him and building around him at all. Tyrese Maxey is playing monster minutes. His price has come up. He was 7.9 last time, and now he's 8.4K. He's not going to be owned. So if somebody on Philly for the high end is going to be owned, it's going to be Embiid, I would imagine. He has like half the boom rating that Joel does, and he projects 20 fantasy points fewer. But he seems like a pretty good play. He's going to play basically the whole game. We know he can blow up. I mean, he's been having success in the series. 33 and 35 real points in the first 2 games. He quieted down a little bit, but still was getting 42 plus fantasy points in each of these last 2 games against the Knicks. So he's viable. I just don't think he really has the monstrous ceiling that we're looking for on this slate, especially when you're looking at some of the other plays. So Maxey is totally fine. Keep him in your player pool. You can use him. He's not going to be owned. He's just not a priority for me. Tobias Harris has not been good in this series. He's cheap enough at 5.5K that we can consider him. But I would much prefer Kelly Oubre Jr., who is a little bit cheaper and just has been playing better. So I trust him a little bit more here. I think both guys are totally fine, and neither of them are necessarily priorities for me. But if you get to them, that's fine. I think a much bigger priority for me is still going to be Kyle Lowry. He is pretty washed, but he's only 4.8K. He's getting a lot of minutes. He's played over 30 minutes in every game in this series. He still can get it done, hitting threes, getting assists, getting rebounds. He can do a little bit of everything still, even though he's ancient. And he's not going to be owned. So if a lot of ownership, right now we're seeing about 15%, about 20% for Tobias and Oubre. If that much ownership is going to flock to those two guys, I'll just save the cash and go play Lowry at 5.8% ownership. Big time, for sure. As far as punts here, you can look at Nicholas Batum. His role has been a little bit shaky lately. He was not good in the last game. His price has come down, though, so you can take a chance on him only getting about 20 minutes and hopefully bouncing back and having a decent game. 3.6K is a pretty good price for a vet in a must-win game. Guys like DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield, they're like out of the rotation, basically. So unless you think that changes, I wouldn't go there. Cam Payne feels like a pretty big flyer, but he is only 3.2K, and he has been playing in the last two games, getting about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the situation. So I don't really feel great about him. I don't personally want to go there, but he's 3.2K, and he's not going to be owned. Just as a quick recap, I do like Embiid and the ownership. Right now, I'm not prioritizing him, but I can see the merit in doing so. And I would probably see Lowry as the main guy I'd go here for Philly right off the bat. On the other side are the Knicks. Their rotation is going to condense just a little bit because Bojan Bogdanovic is out. Mitchell Robinson is also questionable. So that is going to mean a safer workload for Isaiah Hartenstein if Mitchell Robinson is indeed out. Precious Achiuwa could be looking at about 20 minutes as well. So those guys are viable. They're not priorities for me whatsoever. I think Hartenstein is just okay at 5.7. If you get to him, don't have an issue with that. And then Achiuwa is just an interesting leverage play if Hartenstein ends up picking up ownership if Mitchell Robinson is indeed out. If Robinson is in, I don't really have interest in any of these guys. Jalen Brunson up top looks awesome at 9.5K, 54-point fantasy projection for 9.5K, 41% boom rating. I mean, he looks really good. 71 fantasy points in his last game. The Sixers have not had much of an answer for him. I mean, the Sixers are supposed to be a pretty good defensive team, but not apparently to Jalen Brunson. He was a little bit quiet in the first two games of the series, but he has blown up for 39 and 47 real points in his last two games. Obviously, it's really tough to continue, that kind of production. It's just not really that sustainable over the course of a series. So I wouldn't be super shocked if he kind of came back down to earth a little bit today. Hitting that projection is going to be a little bit tough, I think. But he is too cheap, and the projection is really good. The only thing is Brunson's going to be owned. So if everybody's coming in, right now it's at 31%. If everybody's coming in and eating the Brunson chalk at 9.5K, you can obviously get different in a hurry and just hope that Brunson doesn't break the slate. Brunson can go get 50 fantasy points. That's fine. But if you pivot to Maxey or maybe somebody in the Bucks game who's low owned or I don't know, Spida or something, it's not really a true pivot because these guys are considerably cheaper than Brunson. But if you use these guys as leverage, if they're lower owned and they smash, Brunson's not going to make that much of a difference, in my opinion. That said, very good play. I have no problem if that's the guy you want to build around tonight. The other Knicks, they stand out as pretty reliable guys with really nice floors. Josh Hart specifically, his price is coming up to 7.5K, but the guy plays like the entire game. So I have no issue with Josh Hart. He's a triple-double threat, definitely double-double threat. He's enjoyed a good series. He's had 36-plus fantasy points in every single game in this series. Everybody remembers game 2 when he had 21 points and 15 rebounds for 54 fantasy points. So he has a ceiling. He has a good floor. The price is not egregious. Good projection and 28% boom rating. He's going to be chalky. Of the two, Hart for Brunson, I would actually rather eat the Hart chalk just because he's saving me cash. And he's cheaper. Yeah, he's cheaper. So I just like him a little bit more. OG Anunoby coming off of a massive game 4 with 40 fantasy points, 16 points, 14 rebounds in 47 minutes. The minutes are obviously very appealing, but if he's coming at 32% ownership, people are going to eat OG chalk. That's a fucking fade for me. Okay, if OG breaks the slate again and I lose because I didn't play OG Anunoby, I'm okay with that. I can accept that. Okay. But no, his prices come up. I just don't think he's going to do that again. and he's chalky. So Dante DiVincenzo at 6K, 400 more, just not even like a fraction of the ownership, looks way more appealing. With Bojan Bogdanovic out, both these guys are going to play more minutes, and I'm just going to go with the guy who's going to be completely overlooked. DiVincenzo is an awesome GPP play for me today. Love that his price has come down to 6K. He's still going to push for 30 minutes, and with no Bojan, I would feel a lot better about that than they would last two games. So yeah, really, really like him today. I also don't mind Miles McBride at 4.1K. No Bogdanovic means a few more minutes for him. He's actually been getting minutes anyways. He's been getting 21 plus minutes in every game in this series. I think at 4.1K, that's an okay punt. That's an okay value for this slate. So for a quick recap for the Knicks, I think it's okay to pay for Brunson. I don't think you have to, and I think there are ways to leverage that ownership. I do like Hart, and OG and McBride are fine, but DiVincenzo is probably my favorite Knicks play of the slate just because just massive leverage against a chalky OG, I think. All right, next we have the Magic in Cleveland. The Magic, even up the series, is 2-2. Nobody has won a road game yet, so are the Magic going to come into Cleveland and win a road game? I don't really think so, but it's always possible. You know how they say, playoffs don't start until you win on the road. I don't think the Magic are the better team in the series. I was pretty surprised that they won both those home games, and like decidedly so. They won. They were blowouts. The Cavs looked awful. So I'm anticipating Cleveland not playing like pure ass for the third straight game. I anticipate them bouncing back and having a big one. But before we get to the Cavs, let's start with Paulo Banchero, who projects decently. He is cheap. I mean, he's fine. He's probably my favorite Magic play. It seems like him and Franz Wagner just like keep taking turns, like who's going to blow up each night. Banchero was awful last game, and Wagner got 60 fantasy points. And the game before that, Franz was okay, and Banchero got 60 fantasy points. So they kind of just seem to be trading off. I think Banchero just has the better ceiling and floor. And with Franz Wagner was like at like 6.5K for like a while, and now he's up to 7.1. So with his price elevating, he's not out of play. He's fine. He's still a decent price for who he's been in the playoffs. But I just prefer, I think Banchero is the better play between the two. I think Jalen Suggs, his price has come up to 5.8K. He's just okay value. I don't really feel great about the Magic in Game 5 on the road at Cleveland. I think Cleveland's going to respond here. So I'm not super excited to go stock up on Orlando players. I mean, it is the game with, the lowest total and like the slowest pace and the most defensive aptitude here. So like in general, I don't want Magic and Cavs players that much. But Suggs is okay value. I don't really trust him in general. He doesn't have like a major ceiling or anything, but if he's your last guy in, I think he's totally fine at 5.8K. Some ownership is going to Gary Harris at 3.7K and Wendell Carter at 4.3K. I was okay with Gary Harris when we knew he was going to get minutes and when he was getting shots up. He's been awful the last couple of games. Let me just double check. He had in 4 games in this series, he has topped 10 fantasy points once. So have fun with Gary Harris. If he's going to be remotely chalky, that's a big hell no to me. Obviously, he's cheap and he can pay off his price in a hurry, but I don't want to play with Gary Harris if I don't have to. Wendell is fine. He's been getting minutes the last 2 games. He's 23, 25 minutes, 24 and 25 in the last 2 games. So his role has increased from where it was earlier in the series. If that continues, he's a pretty good value at 4.3K. But I actually like Jonathan Isaac as a little bit of a leverage there. He's going to be about half the ownership, similar projection, similar price. So yeah, I would just kind of wait a little bit later in the day, gauge where Wendell Carter's ownership is. If he's going to be really chalky and Jonathan Isaac isn't, Jonathan Isaac looks a little bit more appealing. As a general recap, Banchero is probably my favorite Magic play. Suggs is okay. And Carter and Isaac, I would probably just play one of them, and you can decide which one you want to play. My lean is toward Isaac at the moment. On the Cavs side, I like Cleveland here way more than Orlando. I don't want to go stack Cavs necessarily, but they're all really cheap. I mean, I've been saying it all series that the DFS environment is not very welcoming here. It's going to be low scoring, not a lot of opportunities to have massive blow up games, which is kind of funny because Orlando has maybe eat my words a couple times with Franz and Banchero both having just massive outings out of nowhere. Having said that, Donovan Mitchell has been just crazy quiet this entire series. He was scoring pretty well in the first 2 games at home, disappeared in the last 2 games on the road. In a massive game 5, I am very much willing to bet on Donovan Mitchell at 8.1K exploding. I love him for GPPs. His projection is fine. His price is crazy compared to what was in the regular season. He's got a 25% boom rating at DFS Hero, and he's only 17% owned. Provided that ownership stays in check at sub 20%, I love Donovan Mitchell tonight. The matchup still sucks. The defense environment still sucks. But that is just a really nice price at not that much ownership. You really could say the same for the rest of the Cavs here. Darius Garland at 6.1K. Only downside is has not exhibited much of a ceiling in the entire series. Like I said, I keep saying the same thing. It's not a great spot. He is chalky at 26%. On price and talent alone, Garland is appealing. But if he's going to be mega chalk, I would consider looking for a way to get different there. And I think paying up for Donovan Mitchell as a leverage to that ownership and, eating 2,000 more in salary is a good way to do that. Jared Allen looks really good at 7K. He disappeared also in the last 2 games. In the first 2 games at home, he dominated Orlando. So maybe these guys just play better at home. I don't know. But Jared Allen at 7K, that's a lot cheaper than what we're used to. He was all the way up to like 7.5, 7.8. So, yeah, I like him a decent amount, especially if you're not playing Joel Embiid. He looks pretty good. I probably wouldn't play a ton of Cavs together. I wouldn't necessarily pair Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. But Evan Mobley also looks good. He's $300 cheaper, projects just a little bit under him, and is going to be a little bit less owned. I think Jared Allen has the better ceiling and better floor. He does have the better boom rating as well. So he's probably my preferred play of the 2, but both are definitely in play. I hate that we're talking about more Cavs, but Max Strus is 5K flat. We know he's going to get minutes, and if he can ever hit some freaking 3-pointers, he actually might pan out. The only problem is he's coming in at 21% ownership. So I know the second I tell you not to play Max Strus, he's going to hit like 12 threes. That's what's going to happen. So I'm not going to tell you not to play Max Strus because he's probably going to go off tonight. But I don't really want to be paying for a chalky jump shooter who relies very much on hitting a lot of threes in like a bad DFS environment. So the price is good. The role is okay. Don't like the ownership and don't like the player for DFS in general. So if Strus is going to be super chalky, I'm going to look for a way to get off of that. But if you land on 5K Strus, I think that's okay. A pretty decent leverage might be Karis LeVert. He's $500 cheaper. Projections not that far off, and he's about half the ownership of Strus right now. LeVert's good for like 26 minutes. So he does more than just shoot threes. So I think he's the better DFS play. And he's just a nice ownership / leverage play when you're looking at Strus's ownership. So, I mean, I don't even need to recap here. I do like the Cavs in a vacuum, just sheer salaries. They are too cheap. But my favorite play is Spida. I think he's a really cool leverage play on Darius Garland. And just in general, I think he's going to pop off. All right, last game of the night, we got Indiana Pacers traveling to Milwaukee to take on the Bucks. The Pacers are up 3-1 in this series. This is easily the best DFS environment as long as it doesn't lead to a blowout. It has a 215 total, which feels really low, actually, because the Pacers have the fastest pace in the league. They put up a ton of points in general, and both these teams offer upside from the scoring department. The only problem is the Bucks are probably going to be extremely shorthanded. Giannis and Dame are both doubtful. So if we can't count on them being in, we probably can glean that this game is going to be tilted more towards the Pacers. And if the Bucks want to keep it close, they probably have to slow it down. It's still the best DFS environment on the slate, though. So I don't really care that much about that. That said, starting for the Pacers side, certainly worth noting Tyrese Haliburton is questionable. If he's going to miss a game, this would be the game to do it because the Pacers probably can beat the Bucks without him. And if he's actually ailing, if he's actually hurt, then they can afford to take a break and lose a game if they have to, just to get him right. So right now, I think he plays. If he plays, he's the best pacer on the board. He's still way too cheap for what he's been doing and who he is. I mean, look at his price in the regular season. It's pushing 10K, and he's 8.7. So right up there with Spida. Love the price. Siakam also looks very, very good. They both project well. They're both too cheap right now for what they've been doing and what their roles are. Here's the deal, though. If Haliburton is in, Haliburton's the better play. He's only $100 more. He projects better. He has a better boom rating. He's been smashing, and he's half the ownership of Siakam. You can definitely play them together. I just think Haliburton's pretty good leverage on Siakam. If Haliburton's out, Siakam is probably a core play. His price has definitely come up, but I don't think he's had a bad game in this series. Game 3, he had 38 fantasy points. That's his floor, basically. Game 4, he had 40 fantasy points. So he definitely cooled off from the guy who's putting up 62 fantasy points per game in the first 2 games. And I did mention before in a previous video that that wasn't sustainable. He was just on fire. But in a really, really big game like this, I would imagine he shows up. He is a lock for me if Haliburton's out. He's totally fine if Haliburton's in, but I prefer Haliburton. Miles Turner's price has come up to 7.2K. He's carrying major ownership. He is roasting the Bucks. Talk about lack of, not being able to sustain something. I don't really think that's going to keep up forever. So with his price coming up and coming in at 36% ownership, I wouldn't be that shocked if Turner was a bit of a disappointment here. And if he is, you could just gain instant leverage by just doing something else at center and not paying 7.2K for him. For who he's been, that's still not expensive enough. I will admit that. He has a really nice projection at 41.8 at DFS Hero, 34% boom rating, which is the best boom rating for the Pacers on this slate. So, yeah, you can play Turner. No doubt about it. But a chalky, pricier than usual Miles Turner doesn't feel great to me. So I kind of just hope Haliburton is in, and Haliburton's the guy I'll play of their big 3, and I'd probably personally just get away from the other 2 just because they're carrying ownership and their prices are up. Aaron Nesmith at 5.2K, whether Haliburton is in or not, love it. Love the price. That's good chalk to me. He's going to be coming at 32% ownership. Don't really care. He's getting like 38 minutes a game. We know he can score well. He's just cheap. Same with Andrew Nembhard. Let me just double check his minutes. Yeah, 40, 38 last 2 games, 30 plus in every single game of the series, 29 plus fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. He's been a bit of a problem for the Bucks. He basically got Bobby Portis ejected last game, and he's just been playing well. He's turned into a bit of a glue guy for Indy. So at 4.7K, he's too cheap for the role he has now, so he feels like a core play to me. If Haliburton is out, Nesmith and Nembhard are locked in even more so. And then TJ McConnell at 4.2K would be pretty valuable. I think you can play McConnell anyways. He's getting about 15 to 20 minutes in this series regardless. Let me just make sure I'm actually right about that. Yeah, so he's a good points per minute guy, so you can do worse at like the 4.2. Who's the other value play we're talking about that was getting ownership before? Let me just go back and check. Well, Strus is one at 5K. Gary Harris is another at 15%. So, yeah, I mean, if those guys are getting ownership, I mean, McConnell's not getting no ownership, 25%. But of those guys, McConnell is probably the one I would prefer. So, Obi Toppin's getting some minutes too, 4K. Ben Shepherd at 3.2K is getting some minutes too. I don't really want to mess around with these values that much if I don't have to. The way the slate is going, though, I think picking one of those Pacers does make sense. And right now it'd probably be McConnell for me. And obviously if Pelly is out, that would be very, very obvious. So in general, the Pacers look awesome. But my priorities would be Nesmith, Nembhard, and Haliburton. If Haliburton's not out. On the Bucks side, no Dame, no Giannis. Just crazy usage going all over the place, which definitely explains the major price jacks for Chris Middleton, now 8.5K. For Bobby Portis, now 7.6K. These guys still aren't expensive enough. They look awesome. Chris Middleton at 8.5. I mean, he could obviously just face plant here. He's not 100%. No doubt about that. He's limping around like he's 80 years old. And obviously there's blowout risk because the Bucks are down like 2 superstars. But if they're going to stay in the game, it's probably going to be because Chris Middleton scores like 40 points. Same with Bobby, assuming he doesn't get freaking ejected again. 7.6 is a little bit too cheap for a guy who's a very much a double-double threat, can hit threes, can block shots. He can do a little bit of everything. He should push for like 38 minutes, and, he's got 35% boom rating. It's the highest boom rating for the Bucks on the slate, so I see no issues with Bobby Portis. He's going to be crazy owned at 53%. So in the name of getting different, like getting leverage, you could argue that Bobby gets ejected again, or just, it's a blowout, or he just sucks, and you could go use somebody else like Josh Hart, who is going to be a little bit less owned. You could pivot to Josh Hart. Easily could make that case. But I think Bobby Portis' ceiling is a little tough to ignore here. Brook Lopez looks really good at 6.2K. I think he's probably the best points per dollar play on the Bucks tonight. Basically, when you look at his salary and projection and boom rating and everything, he played 39 minutes last game, had 40 fantasy points. Let me just double check. It's just I'm not spewing lies. 39 minutes in each of the last two games, 41 fantasy points in the last game. He's obviously pretty volatile, but I like him a lot. No reason not to. Pat Bev at 5.4K should eat up the Dame minutes quite a bit. I think you just have to play him. He looks like a really good play. His ownership is very, very low. That should change. I can't imagine why he'd be that low owned. Malik Beasley also looks good at 4.6K. It's just the best DFS environment of the slate. Just so much usage to be soaked up. So yeah, Bev and Beasley look awesome. Not really that interested in the Bucks punts, but Pat Connaughton, Andre Jackson Jr., and AJ Green have all been getting minutes. Pick your poison. One of them could end up having a decent game off the bench. The Bucks surely need it. So I guess my lean would be, nobody here is safe. I guess Andre Jackson Jr. got a lot of burn last game and ended up being pretty productive, 32 fantasy points. So he would probably be my lean. I don't think any of those three are necessarily core plays or guys you have to go to just because any one of them could be the one that, has a good game, or they could all be terrible. So pretty easily. So as a wrap up here, I really like the Bucks and Pacers game in general. I would just kind of look for ways to, leverage the field and get a little bit different. Like if you're going to eat the Bobby and Chris chalk, then maybe don't eat the Siakam and Turner chalk and go get Hallie, like I was saying, and the other Pacers value. If you're not going to get Brunson, then maybe you think about Spida, like I was saying. So we don't know what the ownership is going to be just yet. So all we can do is look at the slate, point out the guys who look good, and look at what the ownership and projections are right now. And as things stand, the mid-range looks way too appealing. So I don't think I'm going Embiid. I don't think I'm going Brunson. I'm going to live with Spida and these Pacers and Bucks guys. And then these value and just like, try to eat the good chalk and then try to make some leverage plays that make sense. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. If it does, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel so you can alert to future videos. It ran a bit long for a 3-game slate, but hopefully that helped. All right, thanks for tuning in and good luck.